Alright my friends, how you all doing? Welcome back to the channel and welcome finally to a fresh episode of our Planet Zoo series, How To. This is sort of my hints and tips series that I've been putting out on the channel, and the last couple of videos did absolute bits, but it's been a very long time since I've put one out on the channel. I did kind of address this on the last episode of Tropical Wings, where I said I'd kind of been working on loads and loads of stuff where the series was concerned. After I kind of put it to you guys, you've sent in loads of amazing suggestions, and we're going to jump into one of them right now. What I am going to say is that some of the suggestions were probably better suited for a Let's Build Together, so I'm going to take some of them and make some of those videos as well at some point. This today might be... it's potentially a very difficult one because there's no right or wrong answer, but we're going to talk about zoo layout. So let's get into it, my friends. So let's get into today's video, and we're going to be talking about all things zoo layout. So this was a one of the comments that was left on a community post I put out a while ago when I was asking you guys what you wanted to see from the How To series and the Let's Build Together. And I've not picked these in any particular order. There were loads of amazing suggestions from you guys, and I'm going to be making an episode on each one of them. But I decided to pick zoo layouts because I feel like this is one that is really subjective. There's no real right or wrong way of doing it, but I can just impart my knowledge on you basically and let you know how I tend to do things. Now, if you're playing franchise, this probably isn't the video for you if you're a big fan of that, because I'm not really a franchise builder, and the trouble with franchise is you've got to build your money up really before you can start making your zoo what you want it to be. So it's probably not for you, but this is probably more for the sandbox player, someone who's just trying to create the best possible zoo, and it will probably make a bit more sense for you. What I'm going to be doing during the course of today's episode, as you see, we're going to be using a blank canvas to start with, because I think that's important, because this is where pretty much everyone starts when they start a new project. And then I'm going to be using Tropical Wings Zoo as an example to show you how I go about building my zoos out, and then you kind of will get to see what Tropical Wings looks like now, and hopefully it will all come together and make sense of the way I lay my zoos out basically. But let's start here. Let's start with a blank canvas. Now, the thing I will say about this, and we talk about this regularly over on my Discord, is that when you start a brand new zoo, it can sometimes be very, very overwhelming, because to just be met with a blank canvas like this and not really have any idea of what you want to do can be a bit much for some people, and it's why a lot of people are put off doing big projects. Some people just like to go in and build one habitat and go from there, but there are ways around it. You've just got to organise it so you know how to tackle your project the best possible way. This zoo layout one really ties in with some of the other videos I've done, like building entrances and building realistic zoos. It can all really tie together, and it all comes back to planning. And I'm going to just give you some tips and some stuff that sort of guidelines that I follow kind of as I go along. Now, the first thing I will do when I'm building a project is I delete the entrance. I showed you how to do this in the entrance video, but essentially you can select all of this and delete it out, and then I go ahead and I delete all the trees as well that's in the zoo, because then you're left with a complete blank canvas, and that might even seem a bit more overwhelming than the original one is. But you've got so much more creative freedom once you do that, because then you can decide where you want to put your spawn points. You can decide exactly where you want your entry points to your zoo to go. As I've already said, I'm going to be using Tropical Wings as an example, and you're going to see that I built an entire section of a city basically, so that I would have a skyline and I would have areas that I could hide the people so they walk to the zoo, so it just felt a bit more interactive rather than it just being an entrance there. You walk up and the zoo is there. There's no right or wrong way of doing it though. Like I say, it's really, really up to you. If you're zooming out and you're looking at this and you're met with this, you can decide what you want to do, like I did all the way around the edge. I built a big city that you're going to see in a moment, and then we were left with an area to build the zoo, or you could just build a car park or whatever. But I guess the first thing you want to do is decide where you want your entrance, because when it comes to laying your zoo out, everything's going to start from there, because that's where your guests are going to enter your zoo, and you kind of build from there. And once you know where your entrance is going to go, you can decide where things like car parks are going to go. This is obviously if you're going down that route where you're going to worry about, realistic things like car parks and things. But once you know where your entrance is going to go, then you can decide where some of your backlot areas are going to go, where some of your car parks are going to go, and all this sort of stuff. Now, so we can explain this a bit better, we're going to jump in now to the city that I use for Tropical Wings Zoo, and I'll show you exactly kind of how it all comes about, where that project's concerned, and it will start to make a little bit more sense. Okay, gang, so this is the city that I built for Tropical Wings Zoo. This is very, very overboard, okay? I'm going to throw it out there now. This, for some people, might look even more overwhelming than just the blank canvas that I showed you a moment ago, but I did this for a very particular project, and you know, this was my floor plan, and this was what I wanted to do first. Now, I kind of said you start with the entrance, but if you're going to add stuff like this, you want to build out all of this first, and then kind of while you're building it, decide where your zoo is going to go. Now, as you're going to see, I've outlined where my zoo is going to go in this project with these blue boards and these walls, and these are essentially the parts where the zoo is going to go. And I'm going to show you more images and more footage of Tropical Wings Zoo as we go along, so you kind of understand how the zoo's been built out and how the layouts came about, basically. So what I would say is, I know I just a minute ago said build your entrance first. If you're not going to worry about this sort of stuff, then build your entrance first. But if you're going to worry about this sort of thing, then maybe build this out first, but kind of try to loosely pick where your zoo's going to go. Now, when I built this, I then decided that the first thing I want to pick where it's going to go is the entrance, and so I decided to put my entrance here. Now, I'm gonna on the screen now put my top tips for planning out a zoo layout, basically, and these are things that I tend to follow whenever I start a new project. This is my third big project on Planet Zoo on this channel. I've got some really cool ideas for the first one that I ever did that's going to be coming up soon, and then obviously lots of people that have watched the channel for a while know all about Jammy Conservation Park, which was a community project where, you know, you guys were really heavily involved. But this is like probably my biggest project to date, though, with the scale and all of the detail that I've gone into where it is concerned. So my top tips for when you're trying to plan out your zoo are as follows. The first one is forward planning. So that comes back to what I've just talked about. You want to decide where your entrance is going to go if you're not going to worry about all of this stuff, or if you are going to build out, you know, a skyline and whatnot, you want to forward plan enough so that you know where that's going, but you also know where your zoo is going to go or where your entrance is going to go. The next thing that I always follow, and I don't think this matters if you're building realistically or not, but you want to find some references. And what I mean by that is you want to take a look at how other zoos are doing it in the real world, because trust me, just by looking at what other zoos are doing will inspire you massively. You'll get to see how, you know, a zoo, you know, the human traffic moves from the entrance, or even from the car park to the entrance, from the entrance to animal one, so on and so on. And it really is a useful tip to do, because you'll start to learn about movement of people in big facilities like zoos and theme parks and things like this. So references are really important. And as far as references are concerned, you can find them by looking on things like Google Maps. You know, you can type in any zoo on Google Maps and you will be able to get a bird's eye view of that zoo. Some of them will even let you drop in, and so you can look around even better. Like I know it's London Zoo, for instance, you can actually drop the person in and you can look at certain parts of that zoo. But you'll be able to see where pathways go, you'll be able to see how things move, you'll see how often there are, you know, things like toilet blocks and restaurants and food stops and snack stations and animals, and it's really interesting to take a look at stuff like that. The other thing I would suggest you do as well, as far as referencing is concerned, is look at zoo maps. So the maps that zoos produce, because even that can be quite interesting, because it won't be as real or as detailed as, say, looking at it on Google Maps, but you'll get a feel for how the zoo moves around, and you'll also get to see where certain animals are placed. And that's the other thing as well, is you want to start looking into where animals go in zoos, because that'll help you plan your zoo out a lot more efficiently. At the end of the day, you built your entrance, you don't want your first animal to be a big ticket animal, because it's really rare that zoos do that, and the human traffic would be really, really busy there. There's some zoos that have done that, you know, around the world. Chester Zoo, for instance, is one off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure the elephants are the first animal you see when you go through Chester Zoo's entrance. So some zoos can do it. bigger zoos maybe that have got the potential to hold more people and move them along better. But if you're building a smaller project, you want to kind of think about this sort of stuff. And so those are sort of my top tips when it comes to planning out a zoo. So what I'm going to do is, I've showed you this part, which was the first step for me. Now I'm going to show you the entrance, so that'll be built, and then from the entrance I'll then tell you how I plan out the next step and then how my zoo comes about from there. And so here you go, gang, this is the entrance. So if we're kind of following the steps as as I've kind of explained it, you would have first been met with a completely blank canvas. You would have made your decisions to delete the first entrance, the main entrance out on any sandbox map. Then you would have made your next decision on what other bits you were going to add, car parks, or if you were going to make a cityscape or you were going to make a backdrop. The next step, as I said, was to always start with the entrance. And the reason I start with the entrance is because it's the start and end point for your guests when they come to the zoo. And so it's the best point for you to start, and it's also the point where you know your zoo's going to end. So you want to kind of build out from there and watch your zoo evolve. So you've got your entrance in. I've obviously put a bit more than the entrance here. I'd kind of planned the initial backlot area, and I've got my gift shop in as well, but I include that as part of the entrance anyway because it's more of an entrance plaza. And that's another decision you can make. Are you going to make a really grand entrance like I have here that kind of includes ticket offices and guest services and a gift shop, or are you going to make something that's a bit smaller? Maybe you're building like a small petting zoo. Maybe you're not going with a big project, and that's all to do with your forward planning and your references and all the information that you've garnered and put together, and then you're putting that into the initial part of the project. So from here you're going to start building your first animal habitat, and really it comes back to all of those top tips that I gave you, or at least my top tips. And remember, there's no right or wrong way of doing this. This is just my interpretation of it, and maybe one or two of you might go away and take a few of these tips and it will help. So from here, you've built your entrance, you've got a little bit of stuff in there, and you're ready to go and build your first habitat. And if you've done maybe a little bit of research on the animals, you would have selected the animal you want, and then it's just about deciding where you're going to put it. And that again is where your forward planning comes in, where your references come in. You've looked at zoos online and you've kind of seen, what direction they will flow, where the animals will go. Now, what I would say, and something that I do, and I do think this is a really helpful tip, especially if you struggle with potentially the size of habitats or where they're going to go, and then you're worried about that once your first one's in, where's the next one going to go? Maybe try to plan ahead. So don't just plan for what you're about to do now, but maybe plan 2 or 3 habs ahead, maybe plan a toilet block ahead, maybe plan a shop ahead. Now we all know, if we've been watching Tropical Wings, that in the end the flamingo habitat goes here, and over here is the beginning of the primates of Africa habitat, and round here that's part of the mandrill habitat. And when I was initially building the project and when I was planning for it, what I will do is I will always go into the terrain paint tool, and I will select one, and I will use this to mark out where certain things are going to go. And I think this is a really, really helpful tool, because not only will you mark out potential space for where that hab's going to go, it will stop you from going too big and too small, because you're going to mark out the area straight away. You can kind of use the edge of the mark that you paint in as your mark for the whole hab. So like for instance, we could just loosely paint here because we know this is where it went, and we can come round here and all the way around there, and then just loosely just kind of paint in this section here, and we know that is where our flamingos are going to go, because we've decided that's going to be our first animal. And then what we'll do is we'll loosely paint over here that this is where part of the mandrills is going to go, and we're painting over here, for instance, loosely paint over here that this is where primates of Africa is going to go. Now, obviously, I'm just doing this very, very quickly. I would probably paint it in a bit more, and a bit darker and whatnot, so I know exactly. But then what you're going to see is there's areas like this in the middle that are green, and in that area, that's where your path's going to go. That's where you can put nice planted areas. You could potentially choose another colour and just paint in here, because in my Tropical Wings, which you're gonna see shortly, there's a park there, so you can mark that out and be like, oh, I want to put a playground there. So you basically, what you're doing is you're loosely marking where things are going to go, so that you can go and work on your flamingo habitat, and then after that you can think to yourself, right, I've got my path here, maybe I could put a planter in, we're going to work on the playground, and then you've got your playground, and then you know what direction things are going to go, then you can work on this, then you can work on this, and it's all about forward planning. And if you've got your references to hand, you've got your research done, then you can just go and build, and it will slowly come together. And what I would say as well is, if you kind of follow those steps of forward planning, your references being right, your research for your animals being done, and then just gradually building out because of the way you've planned your zoo, 9 times out of 10 it will organically evolve into something really cool and really special. Also, you know, you're not just going to be planning things like habs. If you're going for realism, you're going to start planning your backlot areas. Now I am going to throw it out there, I've got another how to and a let's build together on how to build backlot areas, because I know it's something that a lot of people are not really you know, that up on. They want to build realistic, but they're not sure how to include it maybe properly. But where I've done, you know, a fair amount of research because I like to build this way, maybe I've got a few tips for that. So I'm not going to go too heavy into it now, but you've got to think about these things as well. You know, where your guest services are going to go, and also with your zoo planning, what you want to be planning as well as habs, as well as playgrounds, is where are your guests going to walk and where's your staff going to walk. If I zoom in here, you're going to see I've got areas that only my staff can get to. I've put fences in here, this is staff path back here, our guests can't get there, but it's a quicker route for our staff to move around, and it's just interesting stuff. But as you can see, because you've got your entrance in, you know where your start and end point is, and so your zoo can slowly evolve out from that point. And I just think if you can follow those tips, you put in enough work and enough effort, it will slowly come together. And even just doing little things like this, marking out where certain animals are going to go, you know that this is as much room as I want to use, and this is as much room as I want to use, and you can basically go from there. And what I'll do is I will show you how Tropical Wings has evolved now, and sort of show you how these tips have kind of helped me build the zoo that I've built to this point. And so this, gang, is Tropical Wings Zoo, and you're going to see how it evolved from the blank map, then into the city, then into the entrance, and now into the project as you see it. And it all has been done by following those steps that I said. And it's also been done by following the steps in my how to build a realistic zoo video as well. That should not be forgotten, that there's multiple things. Obviously, I'm only just telling you how you can go about making sure your zoo is potentially laid out properly, or to get your project started and so you don't feel so overwhelmed at the blank canvas that you're obviously given at the beginning of any new project. But if I just zoom in on the entrance, you're going to see this is the area we marked out for our flamingos. This was the little mandrill area that I marked out. This was the Primates of Africa area that I marked out, and they've all gone in those places. And it's all about forward planning. I keep saying it, but it is all about forward planning. You can see this path's gone up here because I'm already thinking, you know, one step ahead where we're going to go next with the project. We've got a path going off this way. Where are we going to go next with the project? I've got paths going off this way, and it's all because I'm constantly thinking about where does the project go next. Because the last thing you want to do is be build, and then get to a point where you haven't planned for the next bit, because that's when you get stuck, and that's when you start saying to yourself, maybe this zoo's done, let's start another one. And that's the last thing you want. I get lots and lots of comments quite regularly actually on the channel where people say, I just run out of ideas, and so I've kind of given up on the project. And it's sad. I find that sad because, you know, I've had to do it twice, but for reasons outside of my steps that I follow for building my zoos. But I know this is a really subjective, you know, a video, because there is no right or wrong way of doing it, but these are just my helpful tips. I really hope it makes sense, because really a lot of this is just me talking away and letting you know how I build. I haven't really shown you how to do anything, have I? I've only shown you how to mark things, but these are the steps I follow. And if you're looking at my projects, if you can follow my tips and they help you plan a zoo maybe as efficiently as this one is, because this is a pretty efficient project. This actually really works well. I've tested it a few times with the guests, and it's probably the best functional zoo that I've built so far in Planet Zoo, and I've heavily followed those tips. But like I say, no right or wrong way of doing it, but if these helpful tips help at least one or two of you, then it's a job well done. And so there you have it. We're done and dusted for another episode of How To. I really hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I hope there's a few bits and bobs in there that will help you along the way with your Planet Zoo and building a brand new zoo, or even kind of manipulating the zoos that you've got going, the current projects. And yeah, if you're not a member of my Discord, go join my Discord and start sharing your pictures of your zoos and stuff. I'd love to see it, my friends, and you'll find the link to that in the description below. If you're new around here though, you've enjoyed today's video, you like what you see on the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button. It's the best way to support the channel. Drop a like on the video as well. It's really important. It just helps me out massively for more people getting to see it. And like I've already said, check out that description box for loads of stuff like my socials and the Discord and things like that. Lots going on. Go follow it all, my friends. But until the next one, stay safe, stay humble, and I'll see ya real soon.